1950s science fiction podcast. Riders to the Stars, a 1950s sci-fi movie review. Hello and welcome to the 1950s science fiction podcast. During the fourth episode of the series, I will be discussing a favorite movie of mine. Riders to the Stars was produced by Ivan Torres and released by United Artists in 1954. So far, I hope that you've been enjoying my podcast. As I've said before, I am new at this, so I'm still learning how to create a good podcast. I do ask for your patience when it comes to editing flaws and other mistakes on my part. Hope the podcast is audible to everyone and clearly understood by anyone. Please feel free to send me any feedback by messaging me on whatever app you listen to your podcast. Now on to the episode. Riders to the Stars introduction. Riders to the Stars was a independently made American movie. Riders to the Stars was made independently by American movie producers, but used a well-known studio for its release. The movie was co-produced by Maxwell Smith and Herbert L. Strock, with Ivan Torres being the principal producer. Riders directed by Richard Carlson, who also starred in it as well. The film co-starred William Langdon, Martha Hyer, and Herbert Marshall. The screenplay was written by Kurt Sotomac from an original story by Ivan Torres. The movie got released on January 14th, 1954, with a running time of 81 minutes. Riders to the Stars was shot in color for theatrical release, but it had black and white prints made for TV broadcast. The movie is number 2 in a three-part series produced by Torres. The other two I may discuss in a future podcast. The beginning. The movie starts by showing technicians tracing a space probe via radar. After the probe lands, it disintegrates on impact. This effect baffles the scientists in charge of a top-secret project. The project is a government-funded program designed to put humans into outer space. The head of the project, Dr. Donald Stanton, played by Herbert Marshall, decided that the problem lies with cosmic radiation. Upon the suggestion of a female scientist, Dr. Jane Flynn, played by Martha Hyer, that meteors may hold the solution to the problem. They believe that meteors have certain metals that can protect it from breaking apart on entry into the atmosphere. Therefore, Dr. Stanton decided to on a course of action and contacts the Pentagon in Washington. Upon receiving the request from Dr. Stanton, the Department of Defense conducts an intensive search for qualified individuals. The results yield 12 men who may possess the needed skills for the secret project. A government agent dispatched to each of the chosen persons presents an invitation to participate in the project should he decide to accept. The agent explains that he knows little about the project and secrecy is paramount. Each recipient is transported to an undisclosed location and meets with Dr. Stanton along with his associates. Dr. Stanton explains that he still cannot reveal the reason why they are there. However, he does ask for each applicant's patience and cooperation. He further explains that special tests are needed before they can proceed with the selection. While waiting in a large room, the group is told to make themselves comfortable and will be called for soon. During this time, the group is under observation by a person within the applicants. The observer is not one of the applicants, but an expert in human behavior. After observing the group for 2 hours, he checks in with Dr. Stanton and gives his results. He eliminates a chain smoker and one other applicant who panicked after he tried to leave the room, which was locked at the time. The selection continues. Once the first round of tests is over, The selection process continues with fewer applicants. Next round of tests is more physical and endurance in nature. The tests include putting a man in a centrifuge and to see how well he can stand multiple G-forces. The applicants undergo a hand and eye coordination test as well. One of the test subjects, Dr. Richard Stanton, who is also the son of the project head, does exceedingly well in the centrifuge test. He can withstand 13 times the gravity of Earth, as demonstrated by the centrifuge instruments. The results get the attention of the project heads, and they realize he's a prime candidate for their mission. Hello, Edward German here. I wanted to take a few moments to talk to you about Anchor FM. I am a first-time podcaster and needed resources to get started. I found this through Anchor FM. Anchor provides a platform to use and will distribute your podcast for free. Not only will it appear on Anchor, but also on other platforms as well, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. It is easy to get started. All you need to do is to download the Anchor app to your computer, smartphone, or tablet. Then get started creating your podcast on Anchor. You can record your podcast right from your computer or smartphone using the app. No other equipment is required. Just use what you already have. Also, you have creator tools that will allow you to edit, add music, and effects for your podcast, all for free. One of the best things about Anchor, aside from being free, is you can make money from podcasting on Anchor with no minimum listenership at all. Everything you need happens right here in one place at anchorf.fm. So go ahead and download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM and get started. The decision. After some more testing, the applicants become narrowed to 4 candidates for the project. These include Dr. Stanton's son, Dr. Jerry Lockwood, played by Richard Carlson, and 2 other candidates. Now it is explained to the candidates what the project is all about. Dr. Stanton explains that each of the chosen men will pilot a rocket ship to capture a meteor in flight and bring it back to Earth. Dr. Stanton emphasizes how dangerous the mission will be to anyone who accepts the position. Therefore, one of the requirements for the job was for the applicants to be single. All the applicants are not married. However, Dr. Jerry Lockwood was considering a marriage proposal. He does persuade the project heads that this will not cloud his judgment. Therefore, he does get selected. Not all the candidates agree with the goals of the project. One in particular doesn't agree with Dr. Stanton's at all and believes that he is using the technology to weaponize outer space. The candidate decides to quit the project and thus leaving only 3 pilots. During the discussions, Dr. Lockwood brings up the question of why do you need a human pilot when you could try a computer-controlled ship? Dr. Stanton states that the needs of the mission require a human being because only a human can make critical split-second decisions. Also, a computer would be too large for the rocket ship as well. Considering this was the early age of computers and microprocessors haven't become of age yet. The flight. So now 3 of the candidates get themselves ready for flight. During a pre-flight briefing, Dr. Stanton shows a film depicting mice during weightlessness, while in a test capsule fired into space. He talks to the pilots about the effects of zero gravity on the body and how it would affect them. Should the mission become successful, they will become the first human beings to fly into outer space. During the preparation and testing phase of the project, Dr. Stanton strikes up a romance with Dr. Flynn. The 2 become very involved with each other despite the danger he faces. It creates another plot point in the story. The timing of the flight is contingent on a group of meteors headed to Earth. swarm of meteors is under observation by the Palomar Observatory. Dr. Stanton plans to time the flight to the closest approach of the meteors. It will call for split-second timing for every pilot to execute their command at the controls of the rocket ship. The interception. After Dr. Stanton learns the meteor's time of approach, he calls for the pilots to be ready for an early blast-off. Tensions are running high at this instant, and the rocket ships are checked and rechecked. Dr. Stanton tells his son to be careful and follow instructions by the ground control. All three get suited up in a specially designed spacesuit. All men are nervous but confident they will succeed. The men take off at the same time and head straight for the meteor swarm. Once they are close enough, they will use a scoop inside the nose cone of the rocket ship to capture a meteor. The first one to get close is Walter Gordon, the third man to accept the mission, and is played by Robert Carnes. Unfortunately, his rocket ship explodes on impact with the meteor. Next up is Dr. Lockwood, who's about to try an interception but suffers a mental breakdown after seeing the dead body of Gordon floating towards him. He then panics and tries to exit the rocket ship, only to steer it away from Earth, headed toward deep space. One chance left. Now there's really only one chance left to intercept the meteor, and that lies with Dr. Stanton. Stanton maneuvers his rocket ship toward the swarm, and the scoop is ready, but misses the swarm. However, he sees a fragment crossing his flight path and decides to capture it. He informs ground control of his intentions and ignores their objections. Ground control is concerned about his fuel usage and whether or not he can return safely. Stanton manages to capture the fragment in the net of the nose cone, then makes his way back to Earth while low on fuel. He starts re-entry into the atmosphere with great difficulty. His helmet fogs up, and almost all the power is gone. He nearly loses control, but crashes in the desert near the rocket base. A recovery team races to the scene and found Dr. Stanton unconscious in the pilot's seat. He receives a dose of oxygen from medical technicians and recovers quickly. His father looks over the wreckage of the nose cone and finds a meteor fragment intact inside the net, thus accomplishing their mission. The movie ends at this point. My thoughts on the movie. I first watched this movie on a late night Saturday evening during the horror host featured movies from a local TV station. I watched the film in its black and white version and later in color. I was in my early teens at the time, and I loved watching the movie for the first time, and I continue to enjoy it even today. What I love about this movie the most is the use of hard science throughout the film. It gives the movie a very realistic feel and authority to the plot. Writers made creative use of stock footage of rocket launches and related activities. Most of it was rocket testing at White Sands Missile Base in New Mexico. However, one of the most striking sequences I watched in Writers was the use of a radioactive pill that Dr. Stanton took while in the centrifuge. An X-ray machine showed how his mouth and lungs worked during the increased gravitational forces. Overall, I think it's a good movie for its time. The writer stayed on the cutting edge of science and technology for plot points in the story. It was not unlike the techno thrillers we see today. Writers Riders to the Stars are the type of movies that inspire children to grow up and become scientists and engineers. Also notable was the role of Dr. Jane Flynn. Her character was there to do serious scientific work. The romance between her and Richard Stanton was secondary. As to the main plot of the movie, I don't think that scientists ever captured a meteor to examine the contents to see if it had material that would strengthen other metals. I did do some fact checking and found that the materials for space probes were from materials such as Kevlar and other materials, but not from meteors. However, I did learn that the harsh environment of outer space can erode metals over time, and cosmic radiation does play a part in that. So the movie was not too far off its mark. Conclusion. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for listening to my podcast. I hope to return as soon as I can with another podcast episode on 50 Sci-Fi. Please feel free to subscribe and leave comments. Also, check out my Vocal Media profile page where you can get a written transcript of the show and extras as well.